Of Don Tatzin, Tatzin, being interviewed by Robin Fox, Fox, on Wednesday, August 5th, 2009. We are meeting on the St. Mary's campus to talk about Don's involvement with the Lafayette Library and Learning Center. But anyway. Sorry.
I was trying to get close enough to
it. You don't have
to
speak. You should be just fine. And, you know, you're going to be, every one of the people I've interviewed have been a little hard. I mean, Chris really didn't come to the library until she was working for them, even as a person. The Duffys were a totally different shebang, and here I walk into you, and I got to take this off. Anyway, I'm going to let this flow a little bit. You've got a lot of stories, I think, that you can tell, and I guess there's some starred questions that we need to make sure we covered. You probably saw that it has to do with why are you interested at all in libraries? You know, from whence did you come? How did you get involved in this? For purposes of this oral history, it's, don't make any assumptions. The tape doesn't know why you're mayor, what you've done, the speaker bureau, anything before that, none of it. And I'm sure you tell people this, so I want this to be more you're talking, less my questions, but you can see where we're headed. We're looking to record your role in what is a very large and important piece of Lafayette history. And so this is not the time to be bashful, just lay it out. I mean, but we do want to know also as a child, where, books, libraries, where does this make you go?
So where would you like me to start?
Well, let's start at the beginning a little bit about just why, your favorite libraries, your books, your early childhood, and how you move up to the role that you have been really undertaking, even beyond the role of mayor, as someone supporting this library project.
Well, I guess in my case, I was going to say that my early involvement with libraries was merely as a user. I never sort of saw 40 years ago or 50 years ago a sense that, I was going to have any significant role in developing a new library in any community, much less this one. I hadn't even heard of this community at the time. So
where were you raised?
My first memories of libraries were actually school libraries. And the community library I went to in Florida, in Cocoa Beach, where I would go during the summers and check out an occasional book and read things and stuff like that. Actually, our high school library was, I went to what was a new high school, and we got funding from the Ford Foundation and the Kettering Foundation to have a number of innovative programs in the school, including in our libraries. So we were like some of the first school libraries that had things like microfiche and I forgot exactly what the technology was, but it was like film clips and things like that you could go and set in individual cubicles and things like that. And so that's really some of my first
So were you a big reader as a child? Were your parents big readers, or did you come to this later?
My parents weren't big readers. I read much more than they did. And my sister read a fair amount. She actually reads more than I do. So I'm sort of in the middle in our family. But it was just something I always did. I wasn't particularly athletic, although I spent a lot of time outside doing things. But if I was in the house, I was frequently reading something. And so I gravitated to some fiction, but a lot of nonfiction in my case.
What kind of nonfiction?
Well, what I read now is historical and autobiography, or biographies and autobiographies, particularly of sort of people in politics or society,
Well, which relates a little bit to
what I do, right?
Exactly. So, no big favorite book, but maybe just a lot of memory. Sounds like even not so much as a young child, but as when you're old enough to go alone, and then
I would read. I mean, obviously, I read a lot in school and at home, but I can't remember beyond Dick and Jane all the specific volumes I went through.
Yeah, I think that's true for many of us.
Right.
So you know that some of this oral history is about libraries and how it creates community, and
right.
I don't know much about the Florida community. So how would you characterize, to the extent it was even an awareness of you, what community was like for you growing up?
Well, it seemed like much more of a community than perhaps it was. It was. I grew up in a county that had 25,000 people when I was born, and had 250,000 when I graduated from high school. So, to say it grew rapidly would be a substantial understatement. And probably when I was born, well, the high school that I graduated from didn't exist until I was in 8th grade. My sister was in the first graduating class. I was in the 5th. So, but on the other hand, there are people I've known who lived there since we were Cub Scouts together. So there was a core group of people who didn't move in and out. There are a lot of people who did. And it actually felt like, for a group of us in high school in particular, sort of a fairly close-knit group. But, and I had some community involvement because I was president of a club that Rotary sponsored for high school students.
What kind of club is that?
It was called Interact. So it's their essentially high school club that Rotary Club sponsor. I'm not sure that the Rotary Club
Would
here
it
does.
have been Interact in our high school was a time where you could get together, and it was not kind of like a gab thing, but were they it was like a servicey kind of organization.
It was a
so
service
maybe they
club.
was all over.
It was a service club, and we did things like we had some fundraisers, and we put on a spring sports banquet because the football teams got all the fancy banquets, and the people who did swimming and baseball, etc., got nothing.
So you put together a combined one for the.
So we put together a combined one for all the spring sports. At one point, we raised enough money that we approached our principal and said, find us some kids, some elementary school kids from a relatively poor part of the county, because we want to take them to Cypress Gardens, and we'll charter the bus, and we'll take them, and we'll be their chaperones and things like that. So we did events like that.
Okay, and then how did that transfer as you moved into college, and where do libraries figure in except for sleeping in a carrel?
I was going to say, in college, it was you obviously spent a lot of time in libraries, researching things and checking things out and going back and returning them, and to me, libraries were in college, and essentially were a tool for completing the work I needed to complete.
Right.
I didn't go to the library to, quote, hang out when I didn't otherwise have to be in the library, because I had to be in the library enough as it was. And, the college I went to had several different libraries, as all colleges do, and so you'd go to a different library depending upon which course you were taking.
Right.
And you sort of get to know what's where and things like that. And obviously, the college libraries were worlds beyond what the local town library was.
Right. So when you think about, and I don't know your history enough, so you have to just update me quickly. So I don't even know where you went to college. Where did you go to?
MIT.
Oh, well, there you have it. That would be MIT for those transcribing. Okay, so when you leave MIT, now you've moved from Florida, and you're in a little colder country, and where do you go from there? Where geographically, and how did you get here?
Yeah, in my junior year at MIT, I started working part-time for a consulting firm in Cambridge. Okay. And wound up working on a couple of projects out with the San Francisco office, because I had done some work during a summer for my county's planning department in Florida that was similar to the project that the people in the San Francisco office were doing. And being from the South, I quickly concluded that San Francisco weather is a whole lot better for my taste than Cambridge weather. So they agreed to let me transfer out, so I came out here after I graduated and was here for 6 months. And then I went to Australia, where I had a Rotary Foundation fellowship to go to graduate school for a year. Nice. So did that, and then basically had a job when I came back to San Francisco, and wound up settling in Lafayette.
So were you living in San Francisco for a while before you did? Because at what point are you suddenly want to be in a bedroom community?
For about 6 months, I lived in San Rafael when I was here between the time I graduated and when I left again to go to Australia. And when I came back, one of my fraternity brothers was going to go to grad school in Berkeley, and we were going to room together. And having lived in Cambridge and having grown up in a much more open sort of area, I concluded I didn't want to live in something as congested as Berkeley.
Exactly.
So I looked on a map for a place that would be convenient for him to get to Berkeley and for me to get to San Francisco to work. And Lafayette and Orinda looked like they'd be good choices. So here I am.
So you came on in here nice and single and young, really.
Yeah. I mean, I sort of looked at it from a map perspective.
And so how old were you when you moved in here?
24.
Wow.
And I'm now in my third house on the same block.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I don't. Where do you live now?
I live just north of the BART station.
Okay, so that makes you like a lower Happy Valley? Is that
No, we're it's a street called Orchard Road.
Okay.
It's off Deer Hill.
Oh, okay. Oh. So but it was always convenient to the BART and convenient to everything.
Yeah, because I was going to work in San Francisco, and
he just need to hop on the plane and go himself.
I think it was my senior year in college, or my year I did my graduate studies, was the first gas crisis or gas shortage where there was gas rationing.
Where the lines were. I remember the lines, yeah.
And then there was a second one later, so I concluded, well, while I didn't necessarily want to live in San Francisco, I wanted to be able to live in a place where I didn't need a car if you couldn't get gas.
Right.
So I chose a place that was in walking distance of downtown, walking distance of
BART. Which is perfect.
And now we've just moved up the hill twice.
Yeah, there you go. Well, so many people who then go to work and their first cut is not really a public library. So I guess the question becomes, how long did it take you to get a public library card, and when did you start using this one?
I don't honestly remember.
I mean, not nearly a year, but a lot of people don't at 24 aren't running into the public library.
Yeah, I mean, I probably got a library card within the first 3 or 4 years, because occasionally I might go in and want to
do something.
Look at something.
And there it is.
But I wasn't a frequent user by any means.
Right.
I'm actually still not a frequent user.
A lot of people use it for different reasons.
Right.
And it was the current building. At that point,
it was the 1960, yeah, it was the current building.
Right.
Because it was
It just
78, 79.
Right.
It didn't look much newer. And so I would just go occasionally. But I'd say my first involvement with the city was not with the library per se. It was the Parks and Recreation Commission started having hikes. Mm-hmm. It was led by Kay Peterson and others. And I joined some of these hikes, and Kay Peterson essentially recruited me to apply for the Parks and Recreation Commission, which I wound up joining around 1979. Okay. And that was really my city involvement.
And you're young then, too.
Yeah, so I was about 27 or something like that.
Right. So then, to libraries, we map out how you ended up being mayor these multiple times. So, so take me through that.
So I served on the Parks and Recreation Commission for about 5 years, and then served on the Planning Commission for a year. Mm-hmm. And at that point, that I liked the town, that I had always had an interest in public service and politics. And in 1985, there were 2 vacant positions on the council, because we had Ned Robinson and Tom Cleveland weren't going to run for re-election. Mm-hmm. And the best time to run is when you're running for an open seat. So I figured, well, fine, I'd try it. And there were 5 or 6 candidates, and I worked fairly hard and managed to win.
Right.
And then from there, I've just continued to practice now into my 24th year and trying to figure out how to do it right.
Right. So you get on the council.
In 1985.
Right. And at this point, who's the next person there that has had as much experience with you on that council?
Currently?
Mm-hmm. Who's the next one? I don't think anyone else has had that long.
Well, no. Carol is now probably been on for about 10 years or 11 years.
All right, so give us...
I go through periods where I have more years on the council than the rest of them combined.
Right, depending on who's in and out.
Right.
So well, give us some perspective then on community, how it has changed here in Lafayette during the time that you've lived here. I mean, certainly there's been growth of many different kinds here in the zone. But so what is your perspective? What remains as the key ingredients of our community? What's changing, and what are your feelings about that?
So, obviously I wasn't here for the incorporation discussions and the idea that Lafayette would incorporate as a no property tax city.
Right.
But through the passage of literally decades, what we are seeing is a generational change, because literally the people who founded Lafayette are dying out. Mm-hmm. and can no longer, or in many cases can no longer live in their homes. And a new generation is moving in. But underlying that, I've said for years that Lafayette benefits from what I call a virtuous circle, in that the city has some great strength in terms of the school districts in particular, and in terms of its physical setting and its location that makes it convenient to a number of things. And because of the school districts, we attract people who have children, who want their children to have a good environment in which to grow up, and they recognize that a large part of that is the schools, but it's not the only part. And so they come in and they approach the community with an idea that they want to work to make the community better, in addition to benefiting from living in a nice community. And so by doing that, you wind up getting a better quality of public servant, you wind up getting better quality of volunteers, et cetera, than you might otherwise. That in turn attracts, that in turn means that the schools perform well and that the city is reasonably well run, and that in turn attracts more people who are like those folks. And so you essentially build up this virtuous circle. And so so even when people's children graduate and they no longer have that same connection to the school as they did, they still recognize the importance of the schools both for the community as a whole, because it's their mindset, it's why they moved here to begin with. And then there's the underlying senses that they recognize that having good schools and a good community helps benefit property values, so they tend to support school measures.
Right.
So we've clearly benefited from that, I think, all throughout the time that I've been involved with the city. I would say some of the changes we see is that the people who move in are more used to city governments that provide a broader range of services than we do. When Lafayette was incorporated, it was done with this concept that we would be a no property tax city. And the answer to a lot of things, when people said, "Do you do this?" we just said, "No, we don't do that." Whatever, we don't do recreation, we don't do sidewalks, we don't do landscaping in the downtown, things like that, at least very much. And I would say that a large part of this newer generation of residents sort of comes to us and says, "Well, gee, our last town did all these things. They had a swimming pool, or they had this and that, and why don't you?" And so over time, we've slowly moved to adding more services, and fortunately, we've gotten some more funding to do it. But there is this, let's say, to some extent, intergenerational dynamic that occurs now between older residents who generally felt the city should do very little, and younger residents who are thinking the city should do somewhat more. And the library is an interesting mix of a project that has brought essentially all parts of Lafayette together. And I've actually, in my 24 years on the council, I've never seen a project that has brought out so many different components of Lafayette, all in support of one project.
So talk about that a little bit. Let's get some. You really give me your view of what do you really see has happened, and how is it crescendoing, or what's.
Well, from a city sort of council perspective, we often see things where we'll get seniors to come out to ask us to provide senior transportation, and we'll get parents to come out and ask us to provide better ball fields, or we'll get people to come out and ask us to provide additional programs for sort of their interest at the community center. But if you look at the hundreds and essentially the thousands of households that have supported the library, the thousands or hundreds of volunteers that we've had, they come from all segments. I mean, think about yesterday's tour. So we had Friends of the Library board members there probably from their 30s through their 70s. And if you look at the list of people who've been on the campaign cabinets or the various volunteer committees, it's that same age range. And the city in particular, if you look at for the city, it's really been great because we've been able to attract the interest of what I would call more of the younger families. If you just did a profile of our typical commissioner,
right,
they are in their 50s and older. Their children have probably left home, whether they're in college or whether they've graduated from college. or whether they're hoping they'll go to college. And they're now looking for, for something to do for their community. And the younger parents focus appropriately, I think, their involvement with the school community. And the library's really been the first project that has brought all those generations together.
And so when you look at that, is it the nature of the project? Is it the way it's been run? And in what ways is it that combination that you think has really been the attraction? I know you weren't around for the 1962 building,
right?
So we don't have that firsthand
Right.
experience. But what is it about the way this project has been run, from the campaigning for money to the active involvement, all of it, that you think has worked? How is that?
Well, I think there are several aspects. One is it's been inclusive, and so that it's been happy to accept the voluntary efforts and financial and other kinds of contributions from everybody who wanted to step forward. And it's been deliberately inclusive in the sense that the people who organized the cabinet in particular have said, okay, well, who can we attract who has ties to parents with children in school? Who do we attract who has ties to seniors who have lived here a long time and have the capacity to give? Who can we attract to participate who has ties to the local businesses?
So less nepotistic than it would have been results driven, where the thought was that we needed representatives, and to make sure we had representatives from the various
Right.
groups.
I mean, the underlying sense is that in order to raise money, it's a lot easier to raise money if the person is approached by somebody whom they know, even if that person doesn't make the formal ask.
Right.
To have them sitting in the room when that ask occurs is helpful. So in order to reach those people, you needed this broad network of active campaigners who knew people in a wide segment of the community.
Well, I know in the beginning of the campaign, there were a lot of familiar names. There's in every community, there's a handful of very good volunteers
Right.
that stretch themselves pretty thin. I mean, they're everywhere. They're just active. They care. They're part of it. Yourself, you're in there. Teresa Geringer's in there. Robin Holt is some. You
Right.
can see some familiar names, and new names have cropped up through this process. So, as that community has developed for that, as the big campaign for the big money begins to wind down, and we celebrate this collective thing that's been accomplished, what do you think the long-lasting impact on our community will be, and how we engage all these? There are only just so many board positions, and
Right.
So how can we hold on to that collective community energy, and where might we take it?
Well, one is I think while there are only so many board positions, even in just the library, there are a lot of things to be done in programming.
Right. Totally.
That it's going to be there, sitting there 365 days a year. The best outcome would be for few of the rooms to ever be empty.
Right. Well, even the book room, we know we need lots and lots of volunteers. There's
Right.
definitely a need. The question is really how do you harness it so that with the kind of energy, the excitement that we've had for the breaking.
And I think one way to harness it is to make sure that the organization is, quote, managing it, is receptive to a whole bunch of ideas and doesn't come in with a closed set of, well, this is what's going to work and this isn't, and be willing to try new things. I think the other thing that comes out of this is that this project demonstrates that we can pull together as a community, and let's figure out how to apply that to other activities. And I would give a lot of credit to that to the Community Foundation, which is sort of the precursor to the Library Foundation.
Right.
And what they're now doing is saying, okay, well, we helped create the funding for the library. Let's now think about what other community needs we ought to try tackling.
So for the purposes of the transcriber, we're now talking about the Lafayette Community Foundation,
Lafayette, yes.
as distinguished from the Lafayette
Library
Learning Center Foundation, which is specifically for the library.
Right.
But and what kind of projects are you seeing them?
Well, they're now looking at things like the Rotary clubs have long had an idea of creating a performance stage at the reservoir. So, for example, we've got the concert at the Res that occurs every year with the middle school and high school bands. And sometimes they sit under a tree, and sometimes they sit out on the lawn.
Some sort of something.
Yeah, and I'm really talking about a permanent performance stage. But you can envision that if the performance stage were made, you wouldn't only have to use it once a year.
Right.
It then becomes something that you can have a large number of attractions on. So that's one thing. Another thing that's come out of the community foundation is this idea of essentially a seniors committee, which augments what the Senior Services Commission of the city does. And I think they've done some good work in thinking through what are the kinds of resources that seniors need, getting some information out to them, being a liaison, and a number of other settings to have people take account of what the seniors do.
So the foundation, the Lafayette Community Foundation, being kind of a launch pad
Right.
for a place to incubate projects and then let them fly a little bit on their own.
Help them raise money and then cut them loose.
Cut them loose the way they did the Lafayette Learning and Lafayette Library and Learning Center. So, and what is your role with the foundation now?
I'm a board member.
So you're a board. So give me a quick, just a short list of the seats that you sit on here in the city. You start currently with the mayor, which is rotating, but you always are on the council.
Right. So I've been on the council for a while now, and then
there's the foundation. There's the Lafayette Community Foundation, which you are a board member.
There's the Lafayette
Since inception, or has that been?
Well, pretty close.
Okay.
The Lafayette Library and Learning Center Foundation, where I am the ex officio representative from the council.
Okay.
And then I sit on a number of other governmental agencies.
Is that different from as because you're from the council, representing the council at those agencies?
Well, in most cases. So I've represented the Loma Linda region on the Contra Costa Transportation Authority, what's called the sub-regional transportation authorities, both for Loma Linda issues and also Danville and San Ramon. I've been on this agency called the Local Area Formation Commission, which is a state agency that has a representative group in each county, which sets municipal and special district boundaries. So if Lafayette wanted to incorporate Saranap, it would have to be approved by LAFCO, for example. Right. And for a while, I'd served as the council's representative on the Solid Waste Joint Powers Authority.
And I'm not sure that people fully understand, and you'll have to expound because I can only get you so far on this, that in addition to your role on the council and being aware of the early discussions of the library, and certainly part of the coming through with the Lafayette Community Foundation, you were certainly very active with the Communications Committee, both updating us on the council side, but also you and Teresa Geringer really, we had an initial idea to have a speaker bureau, but it ended up working out a little bit better for the two of you to go almost everywhere with the story and have a very consistent story instead of sending legions of citizen storytellers.
Right.
So what other things have you done for the library?
Well, the library is on the cabinet when it existed.
For the cabinet related to
the library, to the fundraising.
To the fundraising
and
cabinet.
some of the design. And I was on the...
when it was part of the Lafayette Community Foundation. Right.
And I was on although, the cabinet was it was this mixed group, because it had some community foundation members, it had other people who weren't members of the community foundation, but who were very active volunteers, it had some representatives from the city.
And that wasn't the community committee.
So it was just the library cabinet. It was a group of people who came together who wanted to make the library successful. They were focused on the fundraising aspect, but clearly had inputs into design and other things.
And this was the first round of fundraising. First the big dollar ones, and then the first public.
Right. And then Teresa and I co-chaired, with Teresa getting far more than half the credit, the community outreach portion of the Imagine a Place fundraising effort.
And that's where that speaker bureau.
And then we had that at the speaker bureau. And you're right. I think we originally had this idea that we wanted to invite every household to a block party to have someone come in and talk about the library. And so we did this big elaborate map where we said, here are the people you could invite, and we found lots of people to invite folks, and we had initial parties, and truthfully hardly anybody came.
Well, it was truthfully it was kind of a nice idea, but it became kind of this sort of thinly veiled Tupperware party, but we were looking for money for the library, and it just didn't work as successful.
Yeah, it just didn't.
Okay, it was a learning process.
It was a learning process. So what wound up working was that we found groups that were already meeting, and then basically we got them to invite us to come. Right. So whether we had a little card table set up where people could come and talk to us about the library, or whether we came in for 10 minutes and spoke or whatever, and that was fine.
And I know you went to the different commissions, but you also went to some of the what kind of neighborhood groups would you have had at the time that you
well,
could
for
have
example,
had?
there was Spring Hill Valley had a party, had a picnic, and we went to that. We went to one on Victoria Lane. We actually had one at our house. There were several around.
And you would bring your posters and
we bring our
chat,
posters
yeah.
and things. And I think totally at the end we said that the community campaign raised about $500,000.
But what did it? I mean, not a big good money, but not a big. What was the biggest benefit of that community campaign in your?
Well, I think one of the big benefits and a lot of the money actually came through the mailers, citywide mailers that we did. So a lot of the big benefit was getting more people interested in and taking ownership of the library project. And you look back and we now have more than 2,000 households that have made a donation of some size to the library. And when you think about the 8,000 plus households in the city, that's an incredibly high percentage.
Well, give us some perspective, because not everyone would think that's 25% not too high, but I know from actual fundraising statistics that's pretty high.
Well, if you do a typical mailer, you expect to get a 3% response rate, maybe 5%. So here we're 4 to 6 times that. And a lot of those are pretty big donations. So I think a lot of people are certainly aware of the library. A lot of people support the library. You look at the number of people who come to the various bookbinders events that the foundation held. Those have been quite successful and just show a lot of interest in what's going on in developing the library. And I think that clearly has developed a sense of community.
Do you have any sense
how
many people we've touched as a volunteer? But that, I think the more, what I was seeing, and maybe you can then quantify this, is that the larger our volunteer base got, the more ownership they got, the more each one felt they should probably contribute a little bit. And I thought it was really successful, but you tell me if you felt what you feel.
That was very successful. I would say, at one point we had, and this is years ago, we had a list of over 200 volunteers. And so I suspect by now that's gone over 300 or more. I haven't seen an updated count list. But if you just sort of think about the number of people who are right now about to start working on the opening and the gala and the other events that are coming up, and there'll probably be well over a couple hundred people just on those events alone.
And what do you think? Some of the personalities of those have changed in terms of who leads some of those very specific large events. What do you attribute to the ability to continue to attract these really very professional, very people are really bringing their real professional skills to this, which is not available to be replicated in a lot of communities. So we happen to have that. We are lucky. What keeps them coming to this to give so much time to these individual events? And it is a lot of time.
Well, one is we benefit from having people who are highly skilled, who are residents of town. So that's one thing. Second is it's a project that they have some interest in and that they know other people who have participated, who have enjoyed their experience. So typically our volunteers are probably recruited by an existing volunteer. I think sort of an unstated, but I think important reason for the success is that credit is shared very broadly. When you sort of think through the cabinet and the communications and all the other committee processes, you don't hear anybody saying, well, this happened because of me.
Right. That's totally true.
It happened because of us. And I think one of the best examples of that is when we get emails about who had just made another large donation. And typically it was a member of the cabinet who had made the initial contact that got the donation. But, all the thank you emails and congratulatory emails that were going back and forth about that. And it was just a real spirit of cooperative effort. And the thanking for the czarinas for the various events and everything else. So it's been a fun process for people to be involved in, which is not to say it hasn't been a lot of work.
Right.
But I think people felt that they got recognized and that this wasn't competitive. You could actually enjoy doing this, as well as doing something important for the community.
So, everybody has gotten acknowledged in the various oral histories. But when you think of who helped set that stage, that sharing stage, that it's, good job, kind of
Right.
opportunity. Was there anybody that you feel when you look back that started to set that stage very early and that became kind of just the mode of operandi?
Well, I mean, I would say maybe trace it back to, I think my sense is that the Friends operate that way.
I don't know. I'm not, I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm really speaking of the,
right. But,
you know.
To the extent that this started from the community foundation, to some extent for the subsequent fundraising in addition to what Friends put in, I think the early board of the community foundation was very much like that. And then as other members were added to the cabinet, I think they probably came with that ethos, and then they sat in the meeting and realized that that's how how this organization worked, and you pick that up and you operate in accord with that.
It would pay in self-esteem because it
Right.
feels good. Yeah,
Right.
it feels good.
And that I think has been one of the best features of this participation and how the whole library project has helped build community.
Say that. That. So, and explain that again. What do you think that would explain that sort of succinctly about that feature? How would you describe that feature in an elevator? What would that feature be that you think is really?
Well, I think we've used this program essentially has built community because it has spread thanks and congratulations to everybody who participates. And there's not been ego involved in I did this and you didn't do as much as I did, and whatever
Right.
the case may be.
Right, and I think that's very authentic.
Right.
It's a lot of we.
Right.
So, and when you look back at the other things we tried to do at a community before this, you're experiencing with that. Is it was it different? Is this just, have we been lucky with the right people at the right time, the right project? How is this?
Well, I think this is different in terms of scale. As a community, we've never raised $14 million before for a public project. I mean, even if you look at what LASF does in the schools, while they've raised that much cumulatively, they don't raise that much in a single year.
Correct.
Or even in the period during which the library has raised the $14 million. So this is different in terms of scale, both in terms of dollars raised and therefore the amount of people involved.
I don't know that you could do it without what you suggest had to happen.
Right.
I don't know that any one person could have taken this on and just been the president and it's done.
No, I mean, and that's and lots of people stepped up in ways that were compatible with what they were interested in and where their skills were.
So, kind of to come back on that. Do you have children?
No.
Okay. So, what would you say though to someone? You have a niece or nephew? Your sister have children?
Well, excuse me?
Your sister have children?
No.
Okay. So my child walks in with you. I'm trying to get you a feel for how would you describe when you walk in with a child you care about and you want to sort of say, hey, this is my library too, and here's how I feel about it. That if you imagine that first day we walk in and it's real, and I know you've been in and you've seen it in process, and it's a little different for you. You haven't seen it, kind of the wow factor of having not seen it at all and then seeing it completed. But where will your personal pride be with this particular project as it compares to others? You've been involved with so many in the community.
Well, I think it really comes back to the fact that this is a community effort. I mean, it's a gorgeous building. There are lots of gorgeous buildings.
Right.
It's going to be a really nice library and have a lot of additional books and other materials in it. There are actually a lot of libraries that are as big or bigger.
Correct.
So what to me differentiates this for Lafayette is that it really is a community project.
So you were saying the other day that, of course, the mayor job is a rotating job.
Right.
A little bit of a crapshoot for whether or not you'd exactly be at the right time as someone who started with the project and, so active personally with the project to be mayor on the day that it opens.
Well, this is a bit rigged.
This is a bit rigged. No, but I mean, deservedly so. So if you were to, and this doesn't get promoted prior to that, but when you think about that day, and then you must be thinking about it, about
Right.
what will you say, how will you, mark that for the community? What will you bring out as sort of the Velcro speech, the thing that
Right.
you want to resonate with those that were part of it, those that weren't, making it just as important to the ones who just walk in for the first time as to those that have been since the first brick was laid, or even the first dollar
Sure.
collected. What will you do with that? I mean, I think,
Well, I mean, I am starting to think about what I'm going to say a little bit.
I would be.
Yeah. And I think it was Brenda who came up with a line that I used at the first public, when we did the public launch, which was that communities build libraries and libraries build communities.
Okay.
And I think that summarizes what we've done here very well. And so while I may or may not use that particular line, my remarks, in addition to getting to introduce the other speakers, is going to be very much built around that.
Who were you at the kickoff? Were you a mayor at the kickoff? Were you also there then?
I may have been, but
I'm just wondering how that message would have changed.
I got to be
we got this. Let's enjoy this.
I got to be I was the council member who was the MC, whether I was mayor or not, I can't remember.
Right. So what was your message then? And how
my message then is I think was that it was libraries build communities, communities build libraries, and my message then was also just a series of excerpts that I had done some research on of people's definitions of what libraries are and what libraries can do. Really focused on how they can transform individuals and society. And I think my message will continue to be that, with, of course, thanks, not by name, because there isn't going to be enough time, to the hundreds of people who have made this possible.
Well, I think that when you talk about libraries build communities and communities build libraries, and it goes back to that people often say that buildings learn, and libraries learn, and communities learn by just simply living. So when you look at how we already have, if you were to sort of succinctly say, how has this library already built our community and the door isn't even open, what would you say?
Well, I think it's created linkages between many different parts of the community that probably had not existed before, because we've had these intergenerational cooperative efforts. We've had cooperative efforts among segments of the community that had not been as involved in, quote, official Lafayette school stuff as much. For example, the East-West event brought in some people who have a lot to offer Lafayette, who historically has not been as involved in, quote, official things. So it's done that. It's gotten us to think about. It's actually allowed us to harness some more of the great talent that exists within the community. So there's this program committee that's part of the Library Foundation Board that's really starting to think about how do we take all these institutions that have expressed a willingness to participate in the consortium, and not only help them put programs on that are sort of part of what they already do, but I think also importantly, how do we get them to work together to think about programming opportunities that take a topic and allow us to hear perspectives from the point of view of a speaker at the Commonwealth Club and the Greenbelt Alliance and the Lindsay Wildlife
sort of
Museum.
thematically join among themselves, to not just individually provide programs, but to try to work together. Because
one of the things we found early on, Maria Yelm and I went out and we interviewed all of the...
Okay, we're just taking a pause, because that's... Okay, we're going to continue this on the second tape. So you were just talking about, you've been working with Maria.
Well, years ago, Maria Yelm and I agreed that we would go out and we would interview people at each consortium partner to get a sense of what kinds of programs they would be able to offer at the library and under what structures.
Right.
And one of the things we learned from that is not surprising, which is these organizations are generally short-staffed. They are very busy. And so they all live by and large, in their own silos. And the opportunity for them to get out and talk to people in similar positions in other organizations is pretty exciting.
Exactly.
And we provide that forum. And I think that there's an opportunity for our program committee to use that to great advantage. Because I think that in order for us to capture the concept of what this consortium can be, we've got to go beyond offering a whole series of very good programs that are put on by Organization A versus Organization B, but get ourselves and those organizations to think together about how we can take the programming to a different level.
Right, capitalize on the
on
regional
the
resource capability
yes.
of building a community around a library, which is a neutral place.
I mean, for example, the country is discussing healthcare.
Right.
So if you think about it, we've got, imagine what kind of programming we could put on from a combination of our alliance with John Muir, the Institute of Governmental Studies at Berkeley, the Commonwealth Club, St. Mary's, John F. Kennedy, just to mention some
So
of
you
our.
could take it and begin to think offline about a way to work it out, go into these different groups, have them brainstorm back how they might fit, and you could create kind of its own seminar about
Or
something.
alternatively,
Yeah.
Say, bring the five of them together and say, what could be the most interesting approach we could all collectively create, and get them involved
So
in
hope
thinking
that they
through
would
what the
have the
programming
time and
is.
energy to give you a little bit of that under that roof.
Oh, so for example, so Congress has passed the cap and trade legislation.
Right.
So you take the groups that are interested in the environment, and there's SB 375 that passed. It's going to affect land use and air pollution in California. So you bring together the Greenbelt Alliance from a land use planning perspective, the Institute of Governmental Studies, Commonwealth Club again, the zoo sort of thinking about nature, and Lindsay Wildlife Museum.
So get the brains to sort of work together at a common kind of opportunity, and then create this forum.
Right.
I think perhaps the thing that is least understood is that promise of it being a regional resource. Even within La Marinda, people still look at this as Lafayette Library, and we're sitting in Moraga right now talking about St. Mary's, but they're all going, that's your library. I think something like that would go a long way to really, because didn't you promise the state when you went for the money that this was really not just our little library?
Yeah, I mean, we certainly want this. We certainly want this to be regional. I mean, one of the things would be very nice to do is even just to figure out how to find somebody who will help fund us to provide transportation for people who want to come up from other parts of the county and can't otherwise afford to get there.
Correct. Yeah. Sort of begin to find
or at least,
outreach.
if it's something, BART fares.
Right. Yeah. Well, and even getting from BART to there, depending on whatever their issues or challenges are. So, lots of possibilities, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's a. It's a canvas on which we have yet to really start painting.
Well, libraries learn.
We want to make this right.
Well, I think that goes back to Don. Really, how is the community going to continue to keep this group of really professional volunteers, or professionals that also volunteer to maintain that energy, to see that next step and to support that. I don't question it. I just think it's the next challenge as to how to get them rallying around this other aspect.
And I think, again, you give them challenges that they can solve and they get recognized for and they get put into practice.
Well, personally, I believe one of the ways that you guys and the group have succeeded as a whole is that it's fun.
Right.
You get a meeting together, someone will bring a little bit of food. You get, I think there have been people, personalities that have gone out of their way to make this
successful.
Do you feel that it's been fun?
Yes.
So, just going through the list, I guess there were some questions about the 1996 plan, the study that was done, and how did this vision evolve into the real plan, and what did you think created the change from the limited number of people named as contributors? I think we really covered how it grew from this small group to
the large group.
Huge
and I mean, and we haven't even. I mean, you're right. I mean, even before the Community Foundation formed, you had the group. And I can't even remember all the studies. There was a group that went out and sort of thought through what should be in a new library, and then.
And that was a group partly city, partly friends,
partly city.
Library?
Yes, and the city formed a task force. So it had some city staff. I think I was the council liaison. There may have been two council liaisons. And then I remember just a lot of these people went out and they visited probably 20 libraries in the Bay Area. And they sort of took notes on what worked and what didn't. And they spoke to the librarians and got a sense of if they were building a new library again, what would they do differently or what would they do the same. So they came back with a whole series of very useful guidelines for about how to put a library together. Then there was a long effort to figure out where we should put it.
How did that come about, and what were
Well,
looked at, and what were some of the veterans?
I mean, again,
issues
there was the city formed a task force, had some of the same members as what should be in a library task force had, and we spent a long time saying, well, if you want a library, let's say of, I think we were thinking of 15 to 20,000 feet at the time, where are the possible places you can put it, and what are the criteria you're going to use to evaluate it? So we concluded that in general we wanted something close to downtown, and then that limited your sites. And we identified, let's say, 5 or 6 sites, and there were, in Lafayette style, there were evaluation criteria, there were rankings of each site on the evaluation criteria, there were walking tours one Saturday to go out and look at each site and talk about it. And then you finally got down to, well, could you afford it? And at the end, we sort of came down to 3 sites all within the same block. Because we concluded one of the important evaluation criteria was we wanted it south of Mount Diablo Boulevard, so that it would be relatively safe for school children to get to. And we wanted it within walking distance of Stanley, and by implication, Lafayette School. So you thought about, you didn't have many sites. You had the corner of Moraga Road and St. Mary's Road. You had the Veterans site, which of course had the Veterans Building on it. You had what was called the Lincoln property site, which is just across the Golden Gate Way from that site, which has an apartment complex on it. And then you had maybe something where the Union 76 station sits.
Right.
And we did evaluations of the sites and concluded all of them could essentially handle it in terms of size. But if you wanted a downtown, that tended to eliminate the St. Mary's Road, Moraga Road site. The Lincoln site seemed to be too expensive. And we, I think to a large extent through Erling Horn's participation, were able to convince the veterans that both we and they could benefit from building them a new Veterans Hall, and that would free up that site for the library. But that took a long time to do. I mean, that was a couple years of working with the veterans to make them feel comfortable that this is something that they could support, and then building them the building, because obviously they didn't want to abandon their existing building until they had the new one open. So you had all that process. And then once we got through that, then of course there was the selecting the architect process. Which again was we sent out requests for qualifications. We chose a series of what we thought were qualified architects. We set up a design competition where the community would participate in evaluating preliminary designs. The 5 architects came with their preliminary designs and presented them to the committee, and we opened up their designs to the public over a weekend and got, I think, 500 or 600 comments. And then the committee sat down and went through the comments and looked at the designs and recommended an architect.
So we're a pretty smart community. We've got a lot of double degree people. We have, a lot of experience. To what extent does that make it kind of hard to get something done? I mean, the good news is people have opinions, and the bad news is people have opinions. So is it harder to get things done in a community, speedily in a community where people really not only want input, they're really educated input.
Right.
So you can't ignore the input. So is that different from other communities?
Well, hard to say. I've never really spent this much time volunteering in another community.
I think it's good, but
I would say that the good aspects, clearly the good aspect about Lafayette is that the intelligence also comes with rationality. Mm-hmm. And so we have very few people who said, well, it has to be this way, right, and no amount of argument that this way is not a good idea is going to convince me otherwise. Right. Basically we have people who will sit down and give an opinion and listen, and in general, if they believe that their opinion has been heard and considered, even if it's not the winning opinion, say, okay, well, that's
so they're open to
community
reason and community kind of
right.
vote.
And yeah, they don't have to win every battle.
Right. So clearly they're going to have been some detractors, and you will know more than others because you sat through all those council meetings.
Right.
What was the 1 or 2 biggest sort of detractor argument, and how do you think that's changed? And and I'm sure there will still be some detractors. I know there just is.
Right.
But where is that coming from?
Well, I would say that there have been. I would say there are probably two detractor arguments. One has been that libraries are an anachronism in the age of the internet.
Okay.
And that hasn't been brought up by very many people, but that's one argument. I think a second argument has been, okay, even if you have a library, why do you need to do anything more than the simplest tilt-up building you can buy?
So why does design matter?
Right, why does design and all those kinds of features matter? Because what you want to do is have books and resources, then you ought to provide books and resources in the least expensive manner.
Okay, so posture the answers, and what's your counter to the two, to each of those?
Well, the library being an anachronism is that we look at libraries both in Contra Costa County and nationwide, and in this age of the internet, they're not proven to be an anachronism.
Right.
When new libraries open, you have more people going to them, not less.
Right.
We in our little Lafayette library continue to see the rates of usage increase. And since population isn't increasing, it must be driven by interest in going to the library.
Correct.
And so the data just doesn't support the assumption.
Right.
And so while we probably haven't convinced some of those people that their thesis is wrong, I think those of us on the council sort of felt comfortable saying, well, we've researched it, we've concluded it's wrong, and we're moving on.
Yeah, exactly. They're just wrong. And we'll see more usage too in the new library.
Right, and I think really will. I mean, I think our attendance will go up from 500 to 700 a day.
Well, exactly. And so why does design matter? Why did we need to have this great big building with all these different things about it? And it is magnificent. So yeah. Why?
Well, I think that, when you walk into that building, I think that good architecture elevates consciousness and awareness and thoughtfulness. And my first experience of that was there was a chapel on the MIT campus, which was designed by Eero Saarinen. And it was a very small building. But it was just extremely well done. And I remember, just sort of as in a sense of what the effect of good architecture can be, that I was in there on there. And there were these teenagers outside who were running into the lobby, railing at the top of their lungs, and they got into this building and they immediately just fell silent. And it was clearly the building just had this effect on them.
So it bred respect.
It bred respect and awe and sort of caused them to think a little differently. And I think as people go into this space, it's going to again cause them to have respect and awe and think a little differently, be proud of their community. And because it's good architecture, I think it's going to cause them to want to come and spend time there. And when they come and spend time there, not only will they check out books, but they'll read things and they'll talk to people and they'll meet other people and come back for activities. Now, I see a large part of the success of this library, in addition to being people checking things out and reading things in the library, coming to the library for events. And if you create a nice space, people are more likely to come.
I think you're right. I think when you create a space, people will come. The difference between that and the internet is that you can create an online community, right? Easily, pretty much nowadays.
Okay.
But when you go someplace and you see people you know, also in a respectful way and in a building, you begin to say, wow, more people go to the library,
right.
And then you come more.
Right.
That if it draws people in to stay longer,
right.
Then you get what you want. And so maybe the design does that.
I think the design does that. And to the extent that, if down the road people sort of say, when they're talking about Lafayette to people who don't live here, saying, well, gee, we have this really nice library. To the extent you cause people to take more pride in their community, then that's going to spill over into the next thing they might be thinking about.
Right.
And in some cases, that'll lead them to say, well, this is an area we need to improve, and what can I do to improve it? Or when other people come to them and say, well, this is an area where I'd like to improve, would you support that? They're more likely to say, well, I do care about this community, and so let me listen to what you have to say.
Well, and for those that don't know, to what extent are they going to be using the library to centralize some of the outreach that does happen here, some of the community meetings that you attend now? What's happening with that, and how will we be switching the focus of our community when this building opens?
Well, we're going to move city council meetings to the library. We'll move planning commission meetings to the library. Probably circulation and design review will meet. So 4 of the city's public bodies will have their meetings at the library. I think more importantly than that is you're going to have all the consortium programs at the library. Yesterday, during one of the tours, somebody said, the Girl Scouts have these twice a year annual gatherings. Could they have those at the library? I think LASF will start to run some of their programs there. We know we've got a number of music groups that are going to want to use the community theater for recitals. That'll bring other people in.
It just becomes where
it just becomes a.
And so then you mentioned yesterday on our tour. Can you speak a little bit to how, in the event of a disaster, how and why the library will be the spot? Why that was chosen for what we're doing from a disaster perspective and protection?
Well, this really came as a suggestion from our Emergency Preparedness Commission, who said, well, if you're going to, right now, we have an emergency operations center that sort of is the police building. And if the emergency...
Just way down on one side.
Down on one side. And if the emergency is that the dam is broken, it may also be underwater.
Yeah.
So, which will make it a little hard to serve, and it's not clear that's the most structurally sound building in town. So by moving the Emergency Operations Center to the community hall, we're able to build something that was just seismically better, has a separate generator, has
so there's something buried underneath, right? Where is it? There's something.
The generator sits under the community hall.
Oh, okay.
And so you can actually approach it from the amphitheater level. And so it's just a much better center. Now, hopefully, we're not going to have to use it for many years, but someday we probably will, and it'll be good to have it there.
Right.
And it's big enough that you can set up this functions you need to have more conveniently, and you can have rest areas for crews who are going in and out, things like that.
So it becomes where you would say, in the event of an emergency, that's where the people who are dealing with the emergency meet. Everybody knows, and you've got the generator, and it happens to be where all the other facilities are. And by chance, it also has to have a kitchen. It happens to have a number of other, I mean, truthfully, in a very worst case situation, it's also got the real estate to handle someone sleeping.
Right, exactly.
You know, it's a place. So, So going through the questions and making sure that we've covered them, one of them that's specific about the future is what outcome do you hope for most with the new library, and what do you look forward to most doing with the library? Well, where will the library serve you personally most?
So I think for me it's going to serve me as a place to go to events. Some of the course will be city council events, but I think
It'll be walking distance to you.
Walking distance for me. Events by consortium partners and other just community events that occur there. That's probably how I'll use it most. I'm actually a serial reader. I read several books simultaneously very slowly.
Right.
So I'm really not a good candidate for checking things out because I wind up having really excessive fines.
Exactly. But I mean, that's the point is the library is something more than just books. It is wonderfully books, but it is also so many other things. For example, when I interviewed Gloria Duffy Jr., you came in at 24 or whatever when you first moved here.
Right.
What was there to do here then that isn't here now, and how will this replace? I mean, of course there was the movie theater, you could go down Rock, maybe go bowling, but what was there really for someone, to do in town?
Not a lot. I was traveling a lot. I didn't really notice.
Not much. But now it seems like there would be something, perhaps the least misunderstood part is how much this library will be an adult resource. Maybe I think people still don't completely get how much this new library really will be a place adults will want to go.
Right, and I think a lot of that's going to be the programming is what's going to pull the adults in. Because the adults, again, a lot of them will use the library. A lot of them would just say, I'll go to Amazon and order what I want.
Right.
Or go to Lafayette bookstore or go, hopefully now, Friends of Lafayette, the Friends book room.
Right. But there are also all the porches, there are places to sit.
Right, there are lots of places to sit, and it's just a nice place to be.
Right.
We're going to have a liberal food policy, so you can bring your iced latte in. And
I think there's benefit in using the programming to get them through the door, so they see what's here,
right.
And then maybe they'll stay longer
And look at the other things.
And look at
that are
the
there.
other things. Maybe they
Right.
won't, but that they know that it's here, that it's a resource. And there are obviously some concerns, though. You've got the kids that may be doing skateboarding, and so there has to be some
No, we'll figure that out.
rules that will
Right.
apply.
We'll figure out that.
So let me just see if there's. Doing great. You've really covered a lot. Is there anything that you think we haven't talked about? Any kind of, thoughts or whatever that you want to kind of leave with us about the library? I assume you're going to continue on in your capacity in the leadership of this.
Well, I'm up for re-election next year, and we'll see whether the citizens return me or not. Whether
I'm sure
I may
they will.
become volunteer. I may become democratically retired.
Well, I don't know because I don't have the perspective you do, but do you think that more people are interested? Do you see more applications for people to work on commissions? And
It varies. It goes in cycles. We've had we've had some times where it's been hard to get applications. Recently, we've had a large number of wonderful applications for all of our commissions. The last city council election was uncontested. My last city council election was uncontested.
well, no one's going to contest you. As long as you want to do it, people are going
So who knows?
You have name recognition.
I'm governor, according to some.
And the library.
Right.
But I think that the thing I would say, I don't know everybody on the council as well as I know you, but I'd say what I have noticed, both in our initial work with the Speaker Bureau, when so many people stepped up to say they would be willing to
Right.
do those conversations, is that they're really working boards. And this library project has given people a chance to really be
Right.
working volunteers
Right.
and working boards, and that's probably what's helping.
Yeah.
It's just that, as I go back to my question, are you, in some respects, is there a right people in the right place at the right time component to how this library got to
Oh
be?
yes, yes.
And
I think there's some folks who
Yeah.
just were wonderful in
Right.
various roles.
Well, I can't imagine some of the early stages of the communication committee succeeding without Linda
Right.
Peterson in
Right.
terms of now she's just moved, but
Yeah.
I think just-
There's Linda Peterson.
even Gloria Duffy being someone who was
Right.
receptive to hearing from
Yeah.
Bob Fisher.
Well, and Bob Fisher being there to listen to Roger Falcone talk about his conversations with Elizabeth Stage and saying, "Oh, that's an interesting idea. There's a bunch of other people I could talk to who also could participate," and that then becoming the basis for the consortium, which to a large extent is why we won the state grant.
Right.
I
I mean, I think that
Yeah,
it wasn't one
there's-
person, but there just was this
Yeah,
collage
there's
of
Ann Appert and others going out and talking to major donors and bringing in
right.
large donations. There's Ann sort of being involved in just about everything.
Well, and you mentioned in the coffee shop that you'd gone back to work. Well, there was some opportunities when you were sort of on this retirement phase where you were very flexible time.
I am again. I'm going back to semi-retired.
But I'm just saying, I think that it has to do with people's willingness to spend a lot of time.
Right.
I know one of the benefits of the Friends is that I'm not the only one who said this, but part of the benefits of being involved with the Friends is to meet people you wouldn't otherwise get a chance to meet.
Right.
Meet people that aren't necessarily sitting next to you in a bleacher because
Right.
your childs are on the same board.
Right.
I think that there's been a common sense of knowing more people from walks of life within our community that you would
Right.
not otherwise
Well,
get
that's
to
no-
meet.
right.
That requires people who want to get to know those people, and I wonder again if that's a change from the way Lafayette has always been. I mean, that people gathered together in Lafayette and created Lafayette Little League. It's not like there's not history
Right.
of people taking a common thing, but it gets back to what you said earlier.
I think this is the biggest sort of intergenerational thing that I've seen, because you think about who participates in LASF groups. It's a great group of folks,
Mostly parents, yeah.
parents, people who
Well, and
by and
often you
large,
graduate from that, you don't have something to do. I
right.
look at
Well, that's
how
why
they-
people then volunteer for city commissions.
Right. But see, now they may find that the library's a good spot.
Exactly.
You know, and
Exactly.
I would be surprised if now that you aren't housed in a much better room, if people don't want to come to your room and be more party to,
That's
just
fine.
because
Happy
the
to have
needs are
them.
better.
Right.
So is there anything we didn't cover that you?
Well, I would say, the other nice thing is that not only do we have this brand new building, we've actually gone hopefully a fair way towards ensuring that we can operate it.
Yes.
Because you're going back to, what were the things people criticized us for, and then
Right.
the other criticism I didn't get to was, how are you ever going to pay for this thing to operate it?
Right. We just got a big building, there are no books in it, and there are no
Right,
hours. Yeah.
right.
So how is that?
So
What's happened with
so
that?
that's really come about in a couple of ways. I mean, one is the Friends have stepped up very generously and provided another $250,000 to augment the addition of the growth of the collection over the first 3 years. The other parts is that the Library Foundation has now stepped forward with the Open Doors, Open Minds campaign to raise several $1 million to fund ongoing operations and programming and maintenance. The county, even while it's sort of, quote, cutting hours everywhere else, by adopting a new policy, is actually going to give us more financial support for the new library than they had in the old one.
So, and what? Explain a little bit about
Well, what the county has done now is said that they're going to give enough money to each library to operate for 28 or 35 hours. I've forgotten which it is. And if we had been in the old library, that would have been a reduction. Because they would have taken our current number of staff, they would have shrunk them back to whatever the number of new hours is. But what they did was they said, well, you're going to be in this new library. Here's your cost for operating the new library for those number of hours, and it's more than your current cost, so we're just going to give you more money.
Right, because that's our new.
Because that's our new basis.
Yeah.
So that's helped. And then the foundation loaned the money that they raised for construction to the redevelopment agency, which will then pay it back over time. And those payments stretch out for about 25 years, and that will provide ongoing operating support.
They'll be earning a little money.
Right.
You know, it is a bad time economically now, but we did start this campaign several years ago.
Right.
Back to the right time, right place.
Yes, we looked at it.
Yeah, I'm wondering, you know, all across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we looked at every place except probably when we went to bid at an expensive time for construction.
Okay.
So, for example, when Walnut Creek went out a year later, they unfortunately didn't get the state grant, but they did probably time it better in terms of construction firms are hungry.
Right. Right. And you were saying, so we got a lot through the door and heavily committed at a time when people had a little bit more money and the state had a little bit more money.
Right.
But we get the higher costs associated with that. And I had asked you yesterday, you've had such a close look at so much of this. When you look back at the project, where were the biggest surprises to you?
Well, I think I think one is I was surprised by how much money we raised in the private campaign.
Which was how much about?
Well, for the construction period, I think they got to about 12 compared to the original goal of maybe 10 million. And
those were big donor.
Right, a lot of those were big donors. And then for the operating campaign, the goal is to get to 4, and we've gotten to about 2.5 so far.
But in a very difficult.
But in a much more difficult fundraising environment, and also it's a more difficult topic to raise money for.
And why is that?
Well, people generally prefer to fund construction because they view that as a one-time thing. They can, if they're giving a lot of money, they can get their name somewhere.
Right.
This tree is my tree, so to speak, or whatever the case may be. And that's harder to do when you're saying, well, I paid for this month's utilities bill.
Well, and also I think you're sort of saying to people, we've got the building, but now could we borrow some? Could we have a little money to actually keep the doors open? Then you have to have that other conversation of, what you built the building, you don't have the money to keep it open.
Right. So, I think those have been some very pleasant surprises. And we've had a few somewhat unpleasant surprises during the final design and construction process.
And that has been, things didn't come in time,
things didn't come in time. I think we stretched the capabilities of our architects and our
construction crew.
Contractor in ways that I think we hadn't anticipated.
Well, for some of these, like for Overland, who's been great.
Overall,
but they... would this have been their biggest are we stretching them too? Because that's a local person.
Yeah, I don't know that this is their biggest project. I get the sense that it's probably one of the more complicated projects they've done because there's a lot of infrastructure work in terms of the parking garage and all those things, and then there's a lot of very fine detail work, putting the teak upright in this meticulous way in which the granite's assembled.
Right. It's a lot of time using.
Right.
Attention to detail.
And there's just a lot of different subcontractors, each are doing very specialized things. I mean, there have been discussions about the handrails that have gone on for a long time because they have to meet certain safety requirements,
Right.
and they're not just normal handrails because they're going to have some sort of lights in them or something like that. So it's all very complicated.
Well, no. Well, the thing is, it is a complicated project,
Right.
and there's no way to have anticipated exact amount of times in any construction project, and then you overlay a
And-
lot of voices.
And then I think we've also had some issues where I think our architect wasn't ready for a project this complicated.
Right, it's a little
This-
big and complicated.
This was more complicated than what they're used to.
Well,
doing.
and a lot of stakeholders.
Right, and I think we just stretched them. And I think they, yeah. I mean, so the combination of that has really created some construction challenges,
Right, which are hopefully
which we're now within 50 days of having resolved
Yes.
all of them.
isn't it? Which is good news.
Right.
It's good news. So, all right. So, anything else? I think we've covered most of what was on here. You've been terrific about really sharing this experience, and it's just it's been really a pleasure. I don't think I've ever really sat down and talked to you about some of these very specifics about where you've been, and I'm not sure the community as a whole understands how long and how deep you've placed these roots in our community here. I mean, is it?
I've
where
enjoyed
you,
it.
Yeah, is it where you think you'll retire? Is this your community?
I sort of have retired.
I know. You have a one-level rancher.
Right. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
How is it different to be working here and traveling like you did and suddenly being retired here and active? But was it from like if you were talking to someone young who's busy and traveling into the city
Both
all
are
the
fun.
time? They're just different.
Yeah, I mean they're fun. Both are fun and different. I mean, at one level, it was fun to go to the East Coast every other week or go overseas 5 or 6 times a year and meet with lots of people from different companies. At another level, it's fun to work on a project and see it from close to inception through to completion.
Right. So when you first started working at council, how many people would live in Lafayette?
Oh, not much different than now. Maybe 3,500
We can
versus
only
today's
grow so much,
24,000.
huh?
Yeah, we just haven't grown that much.
Well, we don't have the space to work.
Right.
Where would that go?
Right. Well, you had a couple of things. I mean, we've had more homes built, but the average household size has gotten smaller. Because a smaller percentage of households now have children in school than probably did. Because we had more of the original settlers
Right.
when I was first elected.
Right. And this is not completely off topic, but it's something you talked about in the very beginning. I just wanted to get your perspective on it. Is, I come from. You can tell they're babies.
Yeah. Well, they're freshmen.
For those listening to the tape, you don't have to transcribe this, but we were seeing some little raccoons. Very nice. Anyway,